Get a deeper connection with the Cougars of BYU sports.
God gives us a gift, and we use that gift until he takes it away.
Deep Blue.
Just sitting down afterward and being really tired and thinking like, wow, I just won the U.S. championship.
This is Deep Blue. Here's your host, Jason Shepard.
Thanks for tuning in for a new episode of Deep Blue. This is the show where we get to know the person behind the number that you see on the field or the court. These are the true stories of BYU athletes from their own mouths. My guest today, former BYU defensive lineman and current Cougar football radio color analyst, and quite frankly, my good friend, Hans Olsen.
Shep, you're not going to get me to cry, buddy.
Oh, it's on my list. It is on my list.
I got to tell you a story. So I actually went and spoke to a charity group. I go and speak to different charity groups, and they had a golf tournament for this charity group, and I had no idea that they were going to strike a chord with me. But after this golf tournament, they all got together in this big room. I'm speaking to them in this room, and something sparked, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want it to get brought up.
You don't want to trigger again?
I cried until I had to leave. I had to walk out of the room because I was crying so hard because I'm a big ball baby.
You're a softie. Despite everything, despite the persona, you're a softie.
I am. I'm a mama's boy.
Yeah.
I am a absolute sucker for my wife. And I just love life, Shep. I freaking love life, dude. And sometimes you just get hit in the heart.
Yeah.
And you said I'm going to make you cry, and now I'm already getting emotional. But I'm not going to cry.
Okay, so we're going to touch on your world in sports as a player, as a career path. We're obviously going to talk about your upbringing a little bit, but we may touch on some things that may make you tear up a little bit. But we're going to start out with something that may be a little off the wall, and I'm going to ask you when the last time was you've actually balanced something on your chin.
Oh, did you
when was the last time?
Well, I just had a video about 6 months ago went viral.
Okay, then I missed it, apparently.
I told Rock, my son, I said, I can balance a bike on top of a full-size 10-foot ladder. He's like, no, you can't. He goes, because he's seen me balance like chairs and tables.
Sure.
And I was like, son, you don't understand. Like, I've got a level of talent that you have no idea. And he's like, bet. I was like, all right. So we got the camera rolling. I put a bike up on top of a 10-foot ladder, threw it up on my chin, balanced it. We threw it out on video, and the thing went viral. So
I don't know how I didn't see that.
It was maybe 8 months ago, maybe a year ago max. I don't know the exact time, but it hasn't been that long.
Okay, so and I don't know if I've ever heard the story of where this started. How does one even find out that they have this talent?
Well, have you heard that I have another name? It's Pollo Rojo. No?
Yes.
Pollo Rojo.
Yes.
Given to me by the migrant workers in the fields in Idaho. And that was me growing up. I grew up hoeing beets, and we would do, you've got 1.5 mile lines of beets, and you'd go down and you'd hoe out all of the different, weeds, and you'd make sure all the furrows are nice and carved out for all the irrigation. And so as you're going up and down those rows, you get really bored. So I just started putting rakes up there, started balancing hoes. I started putting wheelbarrows on top of rakes. And I just started balancing stuff while I was hoeing out beets.
Okay, but I wouldn't think that the human skull would allow for something like that.
Nobody would. And you have to be pretty dumb to do it. But I wasn't the brightest kid, coming up in Weiser, Idaho. It was like, you find ways to entertain yourself. And then it got to a point, Shep, where I'm like, how much could I do?
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask.
I ended up doing 2 fully oiled railroad ties, which was about 320 pounds.
What in the world?
That I put up on my chin. One teed across the other. So one railroad tie and then a railroad tie on top of that. I did that for my mom to try to impress her.
Did it impress her?
No, because I got it up there. I was balancing it. Everything's good. I went to bring it down, and the railroad tie slipped off the part of my chin, and it actually ripped my chin open. So I dealt with a pretty bad chin injury. And as you know, a chin strap on a chin,
that's going to irritate.
Torn up. But she was pretty entertained by it until it tore my chin. So I've just done it to try to get smiles out of people. And then it was Duff Tittle. somebody that a lot of people listening to this podcast would know. Duff Tittle and
Jeff
Reynolds.
Jeff Reynolds. There you go.
They called me and they said, ESPN the magazine wants to do a photo shoot with you. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It was Duff and Jeff. They called and said, they want to do a photo shoot with you, a full spread. And I was like, let's go. So we got in this studio, and this highfalutin ESPN photographer and this some journalist came in and took pictures of me balancing.
I can see a little bit of a photographic memory. I can actually see that picture in my mind right now. I can remember exactly what that looked like.
Well, it's ridiculous. I'm in full BYU gear, and I've got a dog on top of a bunch of pillows on top of a table that's on top of a stick, and it's just dumb. It's just dumb.
Okay.
And Lavelle, in order to lighten up practice back in our days, Lavelle would have me balance stuff on my chin, and then that's all he knew me for. He didn't even know me as a football player, just the chin balance.
He's like the balance guy.
Yeah.
Bring in the balance guy.
But
all right,
fun stuff.
Okay, we'll move away from the balancing things on the chin. I mentioned that sports, not only is it something that you've loved throughout your life, and your playing career turned into a career for you as well, obviously. But in terms of just sports in general, you've been covering sports in the state of Utah for a really long time. And prior to actually getting into it, was it something, at least that aspect of it, covering it as a media member, is that something that ever appealed to you? Is that something you thought was ever in the cards for you?
Never. No, not one time. As crazy as that sounds, not one time. And, the whole trail is interesting because, number one, if your uncle is Merlin Olsen, you don't play football and then follow that up with broadcasting.
Right.
Because you're just always
you're going to always
second
be
best,
yes,
third best,
right,
fifth best. And it just so happened that I got into football. I loved it. So I followed Merlin in those footsteps. I was in my 7th year of professional football. So I'd played 3 years with the Indianapolis Colts, got cut in that 3rd year. I had just finished up my 4th year in the AFL, arena football, and I had another year on my contract. And radio came and got me. Steve Johnson.
Mm-hmm. I know him.
A name that I'm sure you'd be familiar with.
Yep.
Showed up at a practice and said, "What's your contract look like? And would you ever do this radio thing?" And I had conversations with our very own Alima Harrington. Mm-hmm. And Alima said, "You could do this, dude. You could do this," because I would do interviews when I was with the Colts or at BYU or with the AFL. I'd do interviews and have fun with it. And you know how it is, Shep. You come across a player with personality, right, and it's like, this our guy.
Well, but the other part about this is, and this is the exact opposite of what you are and have turned this part of your life into. There are a lot of former athletes that just want to show up, and if, let's say, they're a football player, they only want to talk about the football stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Or, look, I'm going to just come in and I'm going to be me, and you can interview me for the show. And that's not what you've done. You are a sports radio guy, and if it's time to talk about lacrosse for a segment, you're going to talk about lacrosse. You have fully embraced what it means to be a member of the media in terms of a daily sports radio host in a major market.
Well, you're one of those people that knows what goes into it.
Yeah.
And studying the sports and understanding the sports and being able to relay that across the airwaves is a pretty interesting project. Okay, I'll give you for instance. So Utah gets a hockey team, an NHL team, and I'm integrating myself with this hockey world, and I'm falling in love with it. And so I had mentioned to a man named Jay Stevens, who's kind of an NHL guru, and he's actually the e-bug for the Utah Grizzlies, which is a backup goalie. And I mentioned to him, I hesitate to talk about a sport that I haven't played. And he said, "Let's get you playing." And I said, "I don't know." And he goes, I'm getting you goalie gear." He got me. I'm fully loaded with goalie gear. On March 5th, I'm going to be on the ice at the Mavericks Center taking shots from the Utah Grizzlies.
Oh, you're going to be able to talk with firsthand
yes.
firsthand information.
Yeah, because you understand that.
Yes,
right. It's hard to talk about a sport until you feel a puck hit you at 95 miles an hour and you're trying to get that hand out or that glove out or that blocker up or trying to drop a leg to stop it to really be able to see it, understand it, and then talk about it. But to your point, you've always tried to do that in your career. I've always tried to do it in my career. Like, I really want to bring the excitement of sports to fans. And that's why sitting in the booth with you and sitting in the booth with Greg on a football Saturday or a football Friday and just shooting the breeze and bringing the game to people, and with the passion that we have, because I don't know anybody that has more passion than you. I don't know anybody that has more passion than Greg, and nobody's going to have more passion than me. And we get to sit there and just bring that passion. And it comes from a deep-rooted area of the gut, doesn't it,
Yeah.
Shep?
You have to have, you mentioned the word passion. You have to have a passion. Look, we're talking about a career choice that means you're working weekends, you're working mostly nights, you're going to be away from your family a lot.
Yeah.
There is a certain trade-off, but you have to have a passion for it because you have to be up and aware of a lot of different things that are going on because people, when they listen to you, they're coming to you for the information. You need to be the one that disseminates that information to other people in a way that not only they can understand, but that's entertaining.
Exactly.
And that's the part that you have to balance sometimes is the information, but also you got to be entertaining. If you're not entertaining to listen to, people aren't.
Exactly. And the only way to be entertaining is to be passionate.
Yep.
And whether you're talking about some silly or goofy aspect or you're talking about a serious part of the game, it has to be passion.
Yep.
And you got to sell it with energy. And I've always been able to do that with sports. I love so many aspects of this game. Just like I know you do, man. I know that it comes from an area of true love.
Yep.
And then, you've got a love for a logo that sits on your hat.
That's right.
Like you love this university and you love what it represents and you want to bring that love to the listener. And that adds a different layer of passion and entertainment.
Your career has continued to grow and elevate, and you and I have had this conversation, so I kind of know where your comments may go. But when you were approached to be the radio analyst with Greg on the broadcast, I know that meant a lot to you.
I cried for about 20 minutes. I really did. I sat in my theater room, and I hung up with Greg, and I had tears that came down my cheeks. And I don't know why. I know that it was exhilarating to get the call, and the thought to call the games was incredible. But it was this, it was a lot of years of feeling like BYU just didn't care about me, that they had no use for me. And I'd put in a lot of work to be an upstanding sports member and to love and understand the game. And I'd been in this market for a lot of years. And I kind of felt like when I left for those senior bowls, it was kind of like BYU was like, okay, we did our part. Now go be great. And I always felt like BYU didn't have a lot of use for me. Like it was like, yeah, just stay at a distance, do your sports thing, don't cause us problems. And when I got that call from Greg, it was like, wait a second. BYU still has interest in me. Like they still care about me. They love them or they love me like I've always loved them. And it just reignited a fire in my gut and in my heart for a brand that I played for, that I sweated for, I bled for, that I got my degree from. I came back. It took me 14 years to get my degree.
Right.
I came back to this university to finish my degree, and I paid for it. I paid for it to finish out my degree. Now, props to Mel Olsen, and let's see, who else was helped? Oh, big props to Jim Hamblin. Hambone got me back on campus and got me going. But, I graduated, and when he called Shep, it was like, geez, there's still something I can give them. I'm still of worth to the university. And it sparked a real deep emotion in me.
I want to preface this by saying that I want you to know that when I say this, I'm not just saying this because we're friends and you're literally 5 feet from me. But for anybody that has had the pleasure of listening to the radio broadcast for BYU football game, they know the type of work that you put into a broadcast to make sure, not just because you played and can speak from that part, but you put in the work to make sure that when the time comes that you're needed to say something, it's going to add to the broadcast and it's going to expound on what people are listening to. I do not believe there is someone I have heard that comes into a broadcast as an analyst is as prepared as you are.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And not just that, it goes back to something I said before, can explain it in an interesting and entertaining way so that people know and can see in their mind's eye what you're seeing. That is a talent that and I listen to a lot. I mean, I'm one of those guys, people think, you get done from work and you've been talking sports all day, you want to get away from it. No, I'm listening to sports radio on the way home. I'm listening to games on the way home. When I get home, I'm watching other games. I don't want to get away from it. I love it too much. But, I listen to a lot, and you truly are one of the best I have ever heard at that.
Wow, Chip, that's a huge compliment coming from you. Huge compliment coming from you. That it almost renders me speechless. I really do appreciate that. And, it feels good to hear that because I do put a lot of work into it. And it does mean a lot to me. And when Greg made the call and offered the opportunity, my first thought was, I don't ever want to let him down. That was it. And then my second thought was, I hope BYU fans give me a chance. I hope that they, instead of just, sitting on whatever grudge or whatever edge that they've held for years, because I've been on air for 17 seasons. Yeah. And it's my job to represent Utah State and Utah and BYU and the Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club and everything in between. That's my job. That's my daily job. And I was like, I hope they give me a chance. And then the next thought was, if they do give me a chance, I want them to be impressed. And so those things really have driven me to make sure that when I show up on a Saturday, I don't disappoint Greg and I don't disappoint the BYU fans that have given me a chance. It means a lot to me to represent them and to represent this university and represent this football team. So I put a buttload of work into it. But it is kind of nice because it does correlate with my daily job,
right?
My 3 hours of radio that I do every single day. So it really does correlate with what I do, which is a real luxury compared to what Mark Lyons had,
right,
or what Riley Nelson had. Which, by the way, both of those guys, amazing, tremendous at what they did. And I just try to take different aspects. I try to grab onto some of their attributes and take different aspects of what I excel at, which is all trench play. And really, I've got a depth in defensive schemes that I feel like I can bring to the radio pretty well. But yeah, those are the things that really inspired it, Shep. And your compliment means more than you'll ever know. I really do appreciate it because you know how it is. You put so much work into it, and you're like,
is it being received like I hope it's being received?
Exactly, and you hope it is.
Yeah,
I certainly have received plenty of compliments from BYU fans, and to any BYU fan out there that's listened to the broadcast and responded in a positive way, I really do appreciate it.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll chat with Hans about his family life in Idaho and reflect on his NFL career. You're listening to the Deep Blue Podcast on BYU Radio. Hey Cougar fans, this is Jason Shepard. I hope you're enjoying another season of great interviews here on Deep Blue. If you love Deep Blue, you should check out our other BYU radio podcasts like Her Why. Lauren McLean talks about everything BYU women's athletics with current athletes and coaches, plus stars from the past. BYU has some of the best women's teams in the NCAA, and you want to hear their unique perspectives. So download and subscribe to Her Why on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find podcasts. Welcome back to Deep Blue. Let's get back to our conversation with former BYU football player and current radio analyst, Hans Olsen. You mentioned your mom. You mentioned growing up in Idaho. Mm-hmm. What was life like growing up for you?
Amazing. One of the greatest childhoods you could imagine.
In what ways?
Well, grew up on a farm/ranch area. My dad worked for the state of Idaho in child protection, and my mom owned and operated what was called Fawn's Classic Candies, which was a deli/classic dipped candies. So really, fancy fudge and bonbons and, chocolate dipped cherries and like all the classic candies and her recipes. And she started this business. And so I really got the best of all worlds. I had a dad that was working in child protection, so he was very patient and never raised his voice and had to be patient with me because you know me, I'm a wild hair. I'm a crazy kid. And I needed a patient dad that wouldn't beat me to a pulp. And I was blessed with the right one. And then I was a big kid. I needed food. Constant. And I had a full candy shop.
You had a candy shop.
That I would just sit at and I would just eat. My mom ended up having to fire me from the job because I would just eat. I was supposed to be washing dishes. I would just eat. I was so hungry, Shep. And it was like chili cheese nachos and amazing sandwiches. I could make a big old Reuben sandwich, with the sauerkraut and the amazing rye bread and, like a great Reuben. And all I could do was think about, I can't work. I got to eat. So she ended up firing me, but I was allowed to come down and eat at all times. They did put me into some hard jobs. I mentioned working the fields with the migrant workers. I did a lot of, I had to buck hay for 2 summers. I had to buck hay, which if you ever want to teach your kid that they need to do something other than farm work, have them buck hay. And they'll be like, no, I'm going to find something else to do with my life. Now, bucking hay, as I've grown in life and had multiple jobs and now do media, bucking hay, I think, is a more substantial, more fulfilling, more important job than I do.
Right.
But it's something I couldn't have done because I learned that early in childhood. But it was an incredible childhood. And of course, all raised in a home that was full with the gospel. My mom and dad, obviously amazing members of the church, and gave me every opportunity to succeed spiritually. And that was a really important thing in our home.
When you talk about the types of jobs that you had, look, I think you could probably go one of two ways with that. It either sets the tone for how you're going to handle work and responsibility the rest of your life because you had these very hardworking type duties to have to fulfill. I'm sure when you were younger, you probably under your breath, like, what am I doing? I don't want to be here. But it either sets the tone for you in a good way, or it can go the opposite way. And it's like, I hate this. I want nothing to do with this. It sounds like it really did set the tone for being a hard worker the rest of your life.
It did. And my dad would leave at 6 a.m. and he'd come home about 7:30 p.m. And I watched my dad do that every day of his life until he was 68, I think is when he retired, and never complained, just worked. And between, setting the standard of what hard work is and then having an example of a father that worked hard work is not a problem for me. I would say bucking hay was the worst and most difficult, hardest job of my life, but the NFL exceeded that almost 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, almost 5 times. I can't put into terms how difficult NFL camps are, or at least were under Jim Mora and Tony Dungy.
Do you look back on your NFL time fondly?
No, not at all.
People
don't understand that.
I got that impression, and I'm just curious why.
People don't understand that. I look back at my relationships fondly, but as far as time spent in the NFL, every day was pure hell. Every day forced you to rethink your entire existence. And I can remember, in fact, I would say there were multiple times where my testimony was sliding, like really slipping, where I kept thinking, is this really for me? Is this church, is this testimony thing really for me? And there was a moment my rookie year in the NFL where it was the first answer to a prayer that I'd ever truly felt in the moment. And it was so loud and so aggressive of an answer that I couldn't deny it. Like, it was that incredible. And I'll tell you when it was. Rookie year, running 2-a-days. We're in a town called Terre Haute, Indiana for camp. We'd take over this institute. It's called Rose-Hulman Institute. And we'd take over the entire campus. And it was basically walled off. Everything was privatized, and it's very private, but it's very difficult. And 2 days back in the day in the NFL, which I don't think they allow anymore, it was very difficult. Your morning practice was tough, and the mental part was as difficult as the physical part. And by the time you'd get to the night practice, you'd had it. You're done. You're drained. You have no more energy. And if you remember, Shep, I was an undrafted free agent.
Yep.
So there were 6 guys in front of me that I had to beat out. 4 of them were with the team the year before. One of them was a guy that was brought in from another team, and one of them was another undrafted free agent. And I had to beat out those other 6 in order to just have a chance at a spot. So we're week 3, maybe week 4, and it's that night practice, and Terre Haute is just a soup bowl. All the nastiness and moisture just sits down. It's where they killed Timothy McVeigh. It's where, like, that's where you take the worst human beings and you put them to death. Like, it's just the worst place in the world. And the soup is sitting in on us, and the heat is just really hammering. That night heat and moisture is hammering us. And you got those stupid cicadas that are chirping in the background. And I'm sitting in the stretch line, and I'm like, number one, I'm not going to make this team. I'm not going to beat these 6 guys out. Number 2, I can't physically move. I'm so exhausted, I can't physically move. And I'm doing that stretch where I'm laying on my back and you're pulling your knee to your chest. You know that stretch?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're laying one leg down and you're pulling this. And I had a thought. Ask your Heavenly Father for help. And I prayed in that position. I said, Heavenly Father, if this is where I'm supposed to be, and if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, help me here. And it was instant. It was instant. It was like, no, you got this. I got up. I had the best practice of my life. It might have been the practice that gave me the boost to make the roster.
Wow.
It was like everything came together. I had the energy and I had the clarity. And it was like, geez, man, it was incredible. But I tell this story to express the question that you asked. Every day was that level of grind and grit. Every day. To try to just exist, because I was always a bubble player in the NFL. And my thought was, every day that I can stay in the league and collect a league paycheck can help set me up for X amount of years. And it did. You know, that financial boost that I got in the NFL that nobody gets, it helped me make investments, and it's helped me get to where I am financially. But it was by far the worst thing I've ever done in my life. It's the most miserable I've ever been in my life. And I decided to throw a couple of babies in during that time too, Shep, because...
Just add to the degree of difficulty.
Yeah, because, when life's hard, add a baby.
Yeah.
And all that did was made life hard for my wife, because here she is in Indianapolis. Her family's back in California. My family's in Idaho. We don't have anybody in Indy. And she's got a brand new baby. And I'm off to camp. I left for camp 2 weeks after having our baby, after having Ashlyn. I left. And I was glad to leave. I was like,
I got something to do.
I got to get out of here, man. And as you know, those are hard times for girls.
You better believe it.
But Rob Morris, if you remember Rob, his wife, Tracy, at the time, stepped up and really helped. Jeff Saturday, who was our center, his wife, Karen, Adam Meadows, who was our offensive tackle, his wife stepped up, and they saw that she was in desperate need. And that fraternity and that family is the only thing I miss. It's it. I don't miss the game at that level. It was miserable. So, yeah, I talk about it, and it's hard. I would sit in a shower in a fetal position and just let the water hit me, and I would think, I could have put 9 years into being a doctor. I could have taken any angle and direction, and I could have been making guaranteed money at that point. Instead, I'm sitting there waiting day by day to be cut. knowing that the cut was coming.
What a stressful time.
Well, and I didn't have my degree either. I left BYU. As I mentioned, I had to come back to get my degree. But I had left BYU without my degree. That's why I tell my son, you do not leave college without a degree. You get the degree because then when you're in the league, you don't feel like it's all you got. You feel like, oh, if this doesn't work out, I'll do this, this, or this. I didn't have that. I didn't think of myself as a very educated kid. I didn't think of myself as having a lot of experience in any other area. I saw myself as an athlete. That was it. And if I didn't have athletics, I don't know what I'd do. And it took some time in football, and then it took the media come and get me before, and talking to guys like Alema, that I was like, oh, maybe there's a direction with my character, my personality, quick wit, and it all melded into what we do today.
This is just part one of our conversation with Hans Olsen. In part two, we delve into how certain football coaches profoundly impacted his life. This episode was produced by Ben Hall, with Cleon Wall serving as Deep Blue's senior producer. You can download and subscribe to Deep Blue on all podcast platforms or find all episodes on the BYU Radio app. Deep Blue is a production of BYU Radio.